I want you to stop for a moment and think about what it means when a country at war, a country whose cities are bombed nightly, whose people have been fighting for survival for over 4 years, suddenly finds itself being threatened by a second hostile nation from halfway across the world. That is exactly where Ukraine stands right now. As I speak to you today on March 17th, 26, a senior Iranian official has publicly declared that Ukraine's entire territory is, in his words, a legitimate target for Iran. Not because Ukraine attacked Iran, not because Ukraine sent soldiers to the Middle East, but because Ukraine shared the knowledge it paid for in blood, knowledge of how to shoot down the very drones that Iran first gave to Russia to destroy Ukrainian cities. This is a story about how one war spills into another and how the technology of destruction has made enemies out of nations who never intended to fight each other. Let me take you back to where all of this begins, because this story does not start last week. It starts on February 28th, 2026, a date that will be written into history books. The 2026 Iran War began on February 28th when the United States and Israel launched surprise airstrikes on multiple sites and cities across Iran, killing Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei and numerous other Iranian officials. This was not a limited strike. This was not a warning shot. Israel's military said that top Iranian security officials were among those killed, including the country's defense minister, the commander of the Revolutionary Guard Corps, and the secretary of the Iranian Security Council. The operation, named Roar of the Lion, struck across all of Iran's 24 provinces simultaneously. In a matter of hours, the entire architecture of the Iranian regime was decapitated. I cannot overstate how seismic this moment was. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei had ruled Iran since 1989, 37 years of absolute authority over a country of nearly 90 million people. His death was not just a military event, it was a geopolitical earthquake. As his death was confirmed, some Iranian civilians went out to celebrate in the streets. Footage circulated of celebrations in cities like Isfahan, Karaj, Kermanshah, Qazvin, Sanandaj, Shiraz, and Izeh. In Tehran, people were filmed cheering as a statue of Khamenei was toppled. At the same time, thousands mourned in the streets of Tehran. Iran was a nation divided even in the moment of its greatest trauma, but Iran did not collapse. In retaliation, Iran launched hundreds of drones and ballistic missiles at targets in Israel and at US military bases in Bahrain, Jordan, Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and the United Arab Emirates. The war did not end with one strike, it expanded. The Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway through which nearly 20% of the world's oil flows, was effectively blocked. Global energy markets trembled, and the entire Middle East was suddenly on fire. This is the world into which Ukraine stepped, not as an aggressor, but as an expert. And here is where the story becomes deeply complex and deeply personal for Kyiv. For nearly 4 years, since Russia launched its full-scale invasion in February 2022, Ukraine has been on the receiving end of a specific weapon, the Iranian-designed Shahed drone. Moscow has launched tens of thousands of Shahed-type drones designed in Iran against Ukrainian cities, power stations, and military positions since the autumn of 2022. One nighttime barrage alone involved more than 800 drones and decoys. A spokesperson for Ukraine's Air Force reported that between 150 and 200 attack drones now strike the country daily, with the heaviest waves reaching 700. This is not warfare as the world once knew it. This is a relentless mechanical swarm, night after night, aimed at hospitals, apartment buildings, energy grids, and the spirit of an entire people. But in that suffering, Ukraine built something extraordinary. Ukraine has spent more than a year accelerating development of low-cost interceptor drones. The systems use cameras and onboard artificial intelligence to identify and track incoming aircraft. Operators then guide the interceptor directly into the target drone to destroy it mid-air. Ukrainian interceptor drones cost a few $1,000s each, while Iranian Shahed drones are estimated to cost roughly $30,000. The mathematics of that equation are staggering. For a fraction of the cost, Ukraine developed a way to neutralize weapons that the world's most advanced militaries were struggling to defeat. No one in the world had more experience fighting Iranian drones than Ukraine, and when the 2026 Iran war began and Iranian drones started raining down on American bases across the Gulf, that Ukrainian expertise suddenly became the most valuable military knowledge on the planet. In just a few days after the war started, Iran had launched over 800 missiles of various types and more than 1,400 attack drones. It was Iranian drones and missiles that posed the main threat to free navigation, destabilizing global prices for oil, petroleum products, and gas. Gulf states were watching their expensive missile inventories drain at an alarming rate. Gulf nations had been expending large quantities of expensive interceptor missiles to fend off Iranian Shahed drone barrages since the US-Israel war with Iran began. Iran had targeted countries across the region that host American military bases, with strikes hitting airports, ports, and residential areas in Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. The Americans had a problem that their Patriot systems were not built to solve efficiently, and Ukraine had the answer. President Volodymyr Zelensky moved quickly. Ukraine sent interceptor drones and a team of drone experts to protect US military bases in Jordan. This was not a combat deployment. Zelensky was explicit about that. He said Ukraine had sent 3 specialist teams to Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and a US military base in Jordan to share its expertise in defending against Iranian drones, stressing the mission was technical rather than combat related. This is not about being involved in operations. We are not at war with Iran, he said. 11 countries had already reached out to Kyiv for help. Zelensky noted that Ukraine had the world's greatest expertise in countering Shaheds because of years of defending against them. He also saw a strategic opportunity, one that could benefit Ukraine as much as the Middle East. Ukraine wanted money and technology as payback after sending specialists to the Middle East. Zelensky told reporters that 3 teams were sent to the region to undertake expert assessments and demonstrate how drone defenses work. Zelensky even proposed a broader deal. He wanted to sign a large drone production deal with the United States about different kinds of drones and air defense operating as one system, capable of defending against hundreds or thousands of Iranian Shaheds and missiles. But the deal still needed White House approval, and it had not been signed. There was a painful irony in that. The United States was burning through expensive munitions fighting Iran's drones, while Ukraine had an affordable solution ready to offer, and Washington had not yet said yes. President Trump's reaction to Zelensky's offer was, to put it plainly, dismissive. On March 13th, Trump said the US does not need Ukraine's assistance to shoot down Iranian drones in the Middle East. He went further in a phone call with NBC News, reportedly calling Zelensky the last person Washington needed assistance from. Zelensky's response, characteristically measured, was simply, "Rhetoric is rhetoric." But then, and this is where the story takes a dramatic and dangerous turn, Iran responded to Ukraine's involvement in a way that no one in Kyiv expected, or at least not so openly and so directly. On March 14th, 2026, Ibrahim Azizi, head of the National Security and Foreign Policy Commission in Iran's parliament, made a statement on the social media platform X. He argued that Ukraine's alleged involvement in providing drone assistance to Israel amounts to participation in the conflict and therefore justifies potential retaliation under international law. By providing drone support to the Israeli regime, failed Ukraine has effectively become involved in the war and, under Article 51 of the United Nations Charter, has turned its entire territory into a legitimate target for Iran. Azizi wrote, "Let me break down what he is actually saying here. because the legal argument matters as much as the threat itself. Article 51 of the UN Charter recognizes the inherent right of individual or collective self-defense if an armed attack occurs against a UN member state. This right exists until the Security Council takes necessary measures to restore international peace, and actions taken must be immediately reported to the Council. Iran is attempting to use the language of international law, the very legal framework it claims Israel and the United States violated, to justify potentially striking Ukraine. It is invoking a self-defense clause to threaten a country that, as of this moment, has not fired a single weapon at Iran. This is the core of the contradiction. Ukraine is not at war with Iran. Ukraine sent technical advisors and counter-drone systems to protect American bases, defensive systems, not offensive weapons. There has been no official confirmation or public evidence that Ukraine has provided drones directly to Israel. Azizi himself did not specify any details of Ukraine's alleged drone support to Israel. He illustrated his post with a joint photo of Zelensky and Netanyahu, but offered no evidence, no dates, no specific incidents. The accusation was political in nature, not legal. And yet, the threat carries weight for one simple reason. Iran is not a spent force. Despite the assassination of Khomeini, the rate of ballistic missile launches by Iran declined from the beginning of the war to March 4th, with analysts pointing to a depletion of Iranian missile and launcher stores, as well as a strategy of rationing for a longer war. By March 5th, a military source told Fars news agency that Iran had fired over 500 ballistic and naval missiles and almost 2,000 drones since February 28th. Iran was pacing itself. It was not exhausted, it was conserving. Furthermore, consider the deeper strategic logic from Tehran's perspective. Iran has watched Ukraine supply Russia with drone expertise against Russian attacks. Wait, let me correct that framing, because the truth is almost the opposite, and it matters. Iran gave drones to Russia to use against Ukraine. Ukraine, over 4 years, learned how to defeat those drones. Now Ukraine is sharing that defensive knowledge with countries fighting Iran. From Tehran's perspective, Ukraine has switched sides in a conflict that Iran sees as a broader war against Western and American influence. The Iranian calculation is simple and cold. If Ukraine helps those fighting Iran, Ukraine becomes part of the war against Iran. But there is something profoundly bitter about this logic that I cannot ignore. Iran has been one of Russia's closest allies since the beginning of Moscow's invasion of Ukraine in early 2022. Tehran first supplied Russia with Shahed-type drones to attack Ukraine and later shared the technology, allowing Moscow to set up production domestically. Iran did not consider itself a party to a conflict when it handed Russia the tools to bomb Ukrainian hospitals and apartment blocks. Iran did not invoke the UN Charter when it helped Russia flatten Ukrainian infrastructure. But now, when Ukraine teaches others how to survive the same weapons Iran designed, Iran invokes international law and threatens an entire nation's territory. The asymmetry is jarring. The hypocrisy, by any honest measure, is extraordinary. Now, let me place this in the even larger strategic context, because Ukraine is navigating not one crisis, but 3 simultaneously. It is still at war with Russia, where drone attacks continue nightly. It is now being threatened by Iran, and it is locked in a complicated dance with the United States, its most important partner, at a time when Washington's attention is focused on the Middle East and when Trump has been pushing Kiev toward a ceasefire on terms that many in Ukraine find deeply uncomfortable. Zelensky raised concerns that the ongoing war in the Middle East will impact Kiev's supplies of air defense missiles. We would very much not like the United States to step away from the issue of Ukraine because of the Middle East, he told reporters. This is the quiet terror underneath the loud diplomacy. Every Patriot missile the US ships to the Gulf is one less for Ukrainian cities. Every American military meeting focused on the Strait of Hormuz is one fewer conversation about the front lines of eastern Ukraine. Ukraine is in danger of becoming a secondary theatre in its own war. And yet, paradoxically, the Iran war has also given Ukraine unprecedented leverage. Ukraine's expertise has given Zelensky a diplomatic boost at a time when he is under pressure on the battlefield and when the US has been pressing him to accept unfavorable ceasefire terms with Russia. More than 11 countries have requested Ukraine's help with drone defense. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office requested a conversation with Zelensky to discuss potential collaboration on interceptor drone technology as Israel faces waves of Iranian drone attacks. 5 major European nations, France, Germany, Poland, the United Kingdom, and Italy, pledged millions to co-develop affordable drone defenses using Ukrainian battlefield expertise. Zelensky is trying to turn 4 years of horror into strategic capital. He is trying to trade the expertise that cost Ukraine dearly in lives and infrastructure for technology, funding, and security guarantees. That is not cynicism. That is survival. But now Iran's threat hangs over all of that. If Ukraine escalates its involvement, if it moves from defensive counter-drone advising to anything that Iran can credibly characterize as active support for Israeli offensive operations, the calculus changes dangerously. Ukraine, a country already absorbing Russian drone strikes every single night, would not want to give Iran any justification, however flimsy, to add its weapons to the barrage falling on Ukrainian cities. And Russia, let us not forget Russia, because this is where the geopolitical knot becomes truly suffocating. Russia is providing Iran with more detailed advice on drone operations, drawing on tactics Moscow has used in Ukraine. According to a Western intelligence official cited by CNN, Iran designed the Shahed drones that Russia mass produces for use in Ukraine. These same systems have proved effective at penetrating Gulf air defenses. Russia and Iran are deeply intertwined militarily. A threat from Iran to Ukraine is, in a very real sense, an extension of Russia's war against Ukraine by another instrument. Putin does not need to make the threat himself. Iran does it for him. Russian President Vladimir Putin congratulated Mojtaba Khamenei on his selection as Iran's new supreme leader. The relationship between Moscow and Tehran did not die with Khamenei. It transferred cleanly to the next generation of Iranian leadership. The axis holds. So where does this leave us as of today, March 17th, 2026? Ukraine is a country with a gun against its back from Russia, a new threat being leveled at it from Iran, an uncertain relationship with its American patron, and a world-class capability in counter-drone warfare that almost everyone wants to buy, but few want to pay for politically. Zelensky insists Ukraine's role in the Middle East is purely defensive and technical. Iran insists that any assistance to any party fighting Iran makes you a target. Ukraine has not confirmed providing drones directly to Israel. Iran has not provided evidence that it did, and yet the words are out there, published on social media by a senior official of a nation actively firing missiles across an entire region. This is not a theoretical escalation. This is a real warning from a real official in the middle of a real war. Whether Iran acts on it is another question. Iran is already stretched across multiple fronts and its missile stockpiles are being depleted. But the warning itself reshapes the diplomatic environment. It tells Ukraine that moving deeper into the Middle East conflict carries costs that go beyond the diplomatic. It tells the world that drone technology has become the common thread connecting conflicts on different continents, and it reminds us all that in a world of interconnected wars, the choice to help one friend can instantly make you an enemy to another. Ukraine did not choose this position. It was built by necessity, 4 years of surviving Iranian drones fired by Russian hands. And now the country that designed those drones is telling Ukraine that its survival expertise is an act of war. That is where we stand tonight. The threat has been made. The response from Kyiv has been measured. The war in the Middle East shows no signs of ending, and Ukraine's counter-drone specialists are already on the ground in Jordan. What happens next depends on decisions being made right now in Tehran, in Kiev, in Washington, and in capitals across the Gulf. I will be watching every development as it unfolds, and I will bring it to you the moment it happens. Stay tuned, I'll explain updates as they happen.